Hey everyone, it's me, Rami Marks, your Tangled Yogi out here in Northern California. Welcome to the Starlight Delight Zentangle inspired class. I just taught this for the Napa Public Library last weekend, and I wanted to share it with you as well. Sorry for the delay on this video. I got really sick with a bad cold and was not able to finish recording until now, but I'm so pleased to bring out the video for you all, and I've added a couple of extras in there for you as well. So let's talk about the things that we are going to need for class today. I'm going to be working with the Micron Pen, but you can use your Micron PN pen. It's the same pen. I just love working with this one and I have kept it around forever. So I'm also going to be working with the Jelly Roll 10 from Sakura. This is a white gel pen, but you can use your favorite gel pen. I will also be working with the gold metallic Sakura gel pen. And then I will also be working with a graphite pencil and a blending stump. If you don't have a blending stump, just grab a Q-tip out of the bathroom and you'll be just fine. The tiles that I'm working on are 4.5 inches by 4.5 inches. You can make them on cardstock or Bristol paper so that they're super smooth, or you can just do this in your favorite sketchbook. It might just be a little bit more toothy than what I'm working with. You know me, I am a Prismacolor girl. I love Prismacolor pencils. So grab your Prismacolor pencils. We're going to have a lot of fun with these. And if you don't have Prismacolor pencils, don't worry about it. Grab whatever color pencils you have and play along with us. You'll be just fine. With that said, let's get started with the Starlight Delight class. So hopefully you've gathered your materials and have them ready. Just go ahead and put them off to the side for a moment. We're going to do a little grounding exercise before we start creating. So let's go ahead and take a comfortable seated position here. You can let your feet touch down onto the floor and let your hands rest in your lap. Let your shoulders melt away from your ears here. And if you'd like to, you can allow your eyes to close for a moment. And just let yourself land in your space and maybe taking in the sounds around you and just acknowledging what's there. And then letting your attention come to your breath here and just noticing how your breath is right now. So maybe it's long and full, or maybe it's got a jagged quality to it. So just noticing, not attempting to change anything and not judging it either. And then let's go ahead and start to shape the breath just a little bit. Breathing in to the count of 4. Hold the breath in for 4. And then exhaling to the count of 6. Breathing in for 4. Hold the breath in for 4. And exhaling to the count of 6. Last time. In for 4. Hold for 4. And exhaling to the count of 6. Letting your breath return to its natural pace and just noticing if it's a little fuller, a little easier, and just acknowledging what's there. And as we breathe here for the next few moments, I'm going to share a quote, and this one is from Alice Walker, who I love, and she says, "When you are creating beauty around you, you are restoring your own soul." And so maybe seeing this time of working with Zentangle and color and using it as a time of self-restoration. And taking in one more deep breath right here. Let it go with a sigh. Begin wiggling in your fingertips and toes. and gently blinking the eyes open, adding vision back into your Zentangle practice. And let's get started. Okay, so we are going to get started here. I've got my graphite pencil in my hand, and we're going to start the regular old-fashioned Zentangle way today by putting our dots into our corners here. I'm going to go ahead and start to create a frame for my piece here, and just working my way around. You can see I'm going fairly lightly with my graphite today because there may be some pieces that break the boundary of the frame here. So I'm just leaving those lines nice and light. Okay? Now with that said, we are going to start to build our string. And our string today is going to be a really fun one. We're actually just going to be breaking the piece into 4 boxes like we do a lot of the time, but then we are going to start to bring in a tangle that is going to be part of our string as well. So go ahead and do your frame and then break it up into 4 boxes, and then when we get back, we're going to start with a tangle called Starlight number 2. This is a really fun tangle. I think you guys are going to enjoy it and probably use it in a bunch of different ways, but I really liked it for a string. And so you can see that I have a square here, and if you want to grab a scratch piece of paper to learn it, you can. And so all I'm going to do is I'm going to start just the same way we started with our piece. And I'm going to then start to bring in the diagonals. And you can see I'm just working with my graphite pencil here. And so all she has us do is go into each of these pizza slices in here and create a little line that's coming up towards the middle. You can see that I'm just taking those lines out and I'm trying to make them as equal as I can. But you know, we're human beings and sometimes it's not perfect, but that's okay because we're not looking for perfect, we're looking for handmade. Okay, so here we go. So I'm going to come in and I'm going to start to work with my verticals first and just make diamonds out of these. Once I have that, I'm going to turn it and I'm going to go again, making those verticals go again. And you can see that I'm getting this really nice star out of this. Now you can see that I've got these V's that are open, and so all I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the halfway point on all of these lines here, and I'm going to connect. Just like so. And you can see that we get this really cool star. Now, for her particular tangle, what she does is she continues to make these diamonds go into the corners. Now, today we're not going to be doing that on ours because we're actually using this as a string for our piece, but I just want you to be able to see what she's done where she carries it outwards. You know, this really does remind me of quilting, and I'm sure that there's another name for it in the quilting world, but for right now, we're calling it Starlight number 2. And thank you, Debbie Rayan, for this. It's a great tangle. So let's start to bring this into our own piece here. So let me grab our tile here. And so what we're going to do is we're going to do this on a much smaller scale. So I'm going to come into just this square right here, and I'm going to start to divide it. And then I'll put in my string, and you can see I'm still working with my graphite pencil. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to come up and make those lines. Just like so. Now once I have that, you can continue to do this in pencil. I'm going to start with pen just because I feel like I know where I'm going with it and I feel pretty comfortable. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to start by coming in, making my diamond, and then I'll bring it in towards the center. Same thing down here. Make my diamond, and then I'll turn my tile I'm going to go ahead, make the diamond coming in. This is where you can, make some changes to it. If you feel like you don't like your line quality, you can come back in. And so you can see that I've started to get that really cool star effect. Now I am going to come out towards the outside edge, right where the middle point is, and I'm going to make a little dot and I'm going to connect it to the center. So all I'm doing is coming to the midway point, and that one's a little short, but that's okay. And one more time. And so you can see I've got this really nice star in here. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do it again. All I'm going to do is just come over with my graphite pencil, start to divide the spaces. And what I loved about this was that it created this really beautiful monotangle shape. And you'll see that in a minute as we start to work with the piece here. So you can see I'm just continuing my lines into each of those pizza slices and trying to make them as even as I can. And then I'm going to go ahead and grab my pen, start to build. See that I'm getting these really nice diamond shapes. I always work with the verticals first just because for me it just gets my brain into the groove. Then I'll come out, make a dot, about the halfway point, maybe just a little bit above. Such a fun tangle. You can really just play and have a good time with it. And even if it's wonky, it comes out great. So take a look at that. Isn't that so pretty? And you can already start to see that there's this meta shape that's going to start to show up in the center here. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to continue on just like so. On both of these diamonds at the bottom, you go ahead and do yours as well. So you can see I've had a chance to go all the way around and do my little stars in here. And you can see that in the center I've got this really cool geometric shape that has showed up. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to aura that shape. So I'm going to start by making some points for myself to land on. I'm one of those people that really loves a good takeoff and land point. And so you can see that I'm putting dots in my center area just to give myself a guide of where I should be, heading as it were. And so I'm just going to all the corners and just a little bit below to create these little landing points for myself. So it's going to look a little something like this. And you can see that just by having a place to take off and land, it steadies my hand. Ooh, I was a poet and didn't know it. And I can just turn the tile and land on all these spots without having to worry too much about a shaky hand or, my lines not being perfect or what have you. It just gives me a way of doing the piece in a really gentle and calm way. And even if your lines are wonky, it's going to be just fine because we're going to put in a beautiful organic tangle right in the center and you won't even notice it if your lines are wonky. So here we are. I'm going to go ahead and zoom out. And look at how pretty that is with the aura going around this central piece here. So you go ahead and put in your aura. I'm going to finish up mine, and then when we come back, we're going to start to add right into the center. Now you can see in the center, I have my string lines, my graphite string lines in the center here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start to use that as an opportunity to build a flower inside the center here. So I'm going to come in with my graphite pencil and I'm going to make a small circle that is right where all the lines meet. And then I'm going to go again and do another set. So it has a nice aura there. Once I have that, I'm going to start to build some petals out from the center. All I'm doing is turning and using those guidelines to build those petals. Once I've got those petals the way that I want them, I'm going to go ahead and start to pick up my pen and ink it in. So once I've got this petal in the way that I want it, I'm going to use this as an opportunity to build off of this petal. So I'm going to jump off the side here a little bit and make a petal right in here and come in, and I'll do a second one that's going to jump and it's going to touch the edge. I'm going to do the same thing by bringing it down and center, and then I'll go over here, bring it in, jump off, let it touch, and then from the middle, bring it in. Now I am going to bring a little bit of detailing into that central petal just to give it a little bit of interest. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do the same thing again. So all I'm doing is coming up, create the petal, jump off the side, bring it in, jump off the side, let it go off the edge, and now you can see that that middle line is bringing it all together. So I'll go ahead and I'll do the same thing on the other side. And one more, it's going to go off, and then right at that central point I'm going to bring it in. Now you can see that I've got these really great little interstices. I'm going to just give that little detailing first, and then I'm going to come into those interstices and pool the ink into the area. And what this does is it gives it that really nice graphic feel, and it really brings your eye into the center, which I really love. Now I'm going to go all the way around the piece and do the exact same thing. You go ahead and do yours, and then when we come back, I'm going to bring in a little bit more tangling in these areas up above our stars. We're going to work with a tangle called Fescue, and Fescue is just a line that has a little teardrop on the edge of it, and it's usually pooled in. And we're going to use this tangle to actually build a little bit of interest on the outside area. Now we are also going to be working with another tangle that is actually known as, kind of a cover-up tangle, and it's called Bronx Cheer. But Bronx Cheer has kind of been on a resurgence lately, and all it is a cluster of circles, and you can start to make these little half circles on the edge of it, and it starts to look like a raspberry or a blackberry. It's just a really great tangle for doing all sorts of cool things. So that's Bronx Cheer. And so what we're going to do is we're going to start by bringing it into our piece here. And the way that I did it was I worked from the bottom up. Now you could do it from the top down. It really doesn't matter. It's just how my hands tend to work. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to zoom in on the bottom here. And you can see that I've got these two little triangles right in here. They're kind of these wonky, weird triangle-like pieces. I'm going to leave this area alone as much as I can. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to find that center point right there. And I'm going to start by bringing in a fescue. And you can see that I'm leaving a little bit of space between me and the star. I'll do a smaller one. and then one up here. Now once I have that, I'm going to create an aura that's going to go back to center. I'm going to do the same thing on the opposite side. So I'm just turning my tile, diving into where that valley is, creating that fescue, and then I'm going to go ahead and do the smaller ones. I'll go ahead and start to build that aura. Coming into the center. Now, remember when I said that I wasn't going to ink in my border because we might break it? Well, of course I did break it right there. Isn't that going to be so great? Because then when we come back in with our line, it's going to make it really, really pretty and cool. Now, we were talking about Bronx cheer. And so Bronx cheer is going to look a little something like this. I'm going to come in and start to build these clusters of circles. And then I'll go ahead and I'll start to do these kind of half circles on the outside edge just to give a little bit of interest. Now you'll notice that I'm leaving space in here because I want to put my bird in there. So I'm going to leave space for her. Okay, so let's go over to the next one. We'll do it again. So remember, we're looking for those awkward little triangles, and we're going to start to build the fescue coming in. And then I'll go ahead and I'll build my little aura. I'm going to go over to the other side and do the same. And you can see that I'm trying to make my fescues about the same size. I'm letting that kind of guide me here. And then I'll come in and I'll start to build in that cluster of circles and then do some soft little auras or little half circles around them. And so that way my bird is going to fit in there. And by the way, when you put your bird in there, if you've got more room to make the berries bigger, you can make the berries bigger. Okay? So that when I zoom out, here we are. We've got this really nice space for the birds and we've got our fescues there. So I'm going to just continue to go around the piece here and do that. So we've done these two. I'm just going to start by building these in. And you know, a lot of the time you guys have seen me when I'm doing the same tangle over and over again, I'll just come in and do the groundwork for it first, and then I'll come around and do my auras after I've had a chance to go all the way around. And for me, what this does is it just helps to build a felt memory inside of the body here, and it makes it easier for me to do the tangle. So you're going to see me do my fescues first, just dropping those in, and just coming in, coming over to the other side and doing the same. And then once I have that, I'll start to build that aura around it, just like so. And then once I have that, I can come back in and start to build those berries in there. You can see that I'm really staying close to the fescue because I really want to leave enough room for my birds. Coming in over here and doing the same. So just a couple of those little orbs, staying close to the fescue, and then just creating those little orbs. And so now you can see when I zoom out, look at how that frames the space in such a nice way. So you go ahead and do yours. I'm going to finish up mine, and then when we come back, we're going to bring in our birds. So let's bring in our birds here. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use my graphite pencil, and I'm going to start by making a backwards C. That looks a little something like that. And then once I have that, from this point where I am, I'm going to let it drop down just a little bit so it almost looks like a hook. And then I'm going to let it drop out like so. And that's going to be the tail. Now, for this area where I have the indentation, I'm just going to go ahead and give this a little bit of printemps. And then I'm going to start to bring these kind of petals that are going to go outward towards the tail. Super fun and super easy. I'll give him his beak and his little eye, and there's our bird. Super fun, really, really straightforward and simple. So let's come into our piece here that we have, and you can see that I'm underneath the berries in here. And I also have these 2 points in which I'm working with. So I'm just going to go under those 2 points here, and I'm going to do a C that drops down and touches right here, and then I'm going to let it come back in and flow. I'm going to let this drop down to create a little bit of that hook, and then I'm going to go ahead and let it touch the edge. I'll come back in and I'll do a little bit of printemps, and then remember how we had those little flower petals? I'm just going to go ahead and bring those flower petals in and let them connect to the edge. I'm going to give him a little beak, and then I'll give him his eye. Now you can either do a dot for the eye, or you can do just a little bit of that little smiley face, which kind of makes him look like his eye is closed. So it's really up to you. So let's go ahead and do it again. And one of the things that I talked about in class when I was teaching it was each bird is going to be different. All birds are different. So if all your birds are different, don't worry about it. So I'm going to come up, look where my 2 points are, find the middle here, make that C curve or a backward C curve, and just let it line up with the edge. And then I'll come down doing that indentation, drop it into the corner there, and then once again coming around, making printemps, and then going in with those little petals. And then once again you can do a dot, or you can do the smiley face, and that creates your bird. Now I'll come in and I'll pick up my pen and I'll start to do an overdraw on these. So you can see that I'm going to just go in, drop it in. Nice little printemps. And then once again creating that super soft little petal for that bird. Go in and do the eye, and there you have it. And then this one I can show you with the eye closed, because I love it when the birds have their eyes closed. It looks like they're meditating, which I think is very sweet. Let that go off into the corner. And you can do so much with these little birds. They're just so sweet and fun. I'm just going in and bringing that in. Okay? So you go ahead and do yours. I'm going to finish up mine, and then when we come back, I think it's time for color. Now, before we get started with color, I am going to start to ink in my border here. And remember when we were talking about having that nice interrupted border? I'm really pleased that that happened. So I'm just going to go in and start to ink in my border here, and you'll notice that I'm going to lift up and come out the other side, turning the tile to make it work for your hands here. And what I love about a good frame on a piece is that it can really contain all of the fun tangles that are within it. It just gives it kind of a nice finished edge. So here we go, just coming around, lifting up and coming out the other side. And now we've got this nice frame in which our tangles are included. Okay, so you go ahead and do yours. I'm going to finish up mine. Grab a piece of chocolate because we're going to start working with color. And one last thing before we actually start in with our colors, we're going to do just a little bit of detailing inside of our stars here. You'll have to forgive me, this cold has got my head a little bit foggy. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to come into where the star is, and I'm going to just start to make a circle inside of the star so that we get a nice focal point. And I'm going to go around to each of these stars and do the same thing. And one more over here. And one last one over here. Now once I have that, you can see that that's already starting to bring in a little bit of interest into the piece. I'm going to focus in on this star right in here, and you're going to see me work with my verticals and my horizontals, and all I'm doing is creating a nice division right in through the center of those diamonds there. So you can see that that gives that a little bit of a 3D effect. So I'm going to do the same thing over here. I'm going to the verticals first, and then I'll go to the horizontal and carry it through. And I'm going to do the same thing down here. And this is really going to make this a really beautiful piece once we start to get shading on it. We're going to be using graphite next to color, which is one of my favorite color combinations, and it really is going to make that star just come forward here. So you can see that all I'm doing is the verticals and the horizontals. I'm not working in the diagonal pieces, okay? All right, with that said, we are going to pick up some colors, and the colors that I'm going to be working with today inside of our star is, I've got the blush pink from Prisma, which is PC928. I also have process red, which I believe is PC, let's see here, 930. And then I also have my color in here. This is the yellowed orange, which is PC1002. So what I'm really looking for in here is I'm looking for a pink, I'm looking for almost like a wine color red, and then I'm also looking for a warm yellow. So go ahead and gather yours, and then when we come back, we're going to start to work on the piece. So I picked up my kneaded eraser here, and I'm just going through and getting rid of any of my string lines that might still be there. You know I love these erasers because they don't make a mess, and they are very easy to clean, very easy to work with. So like you can see that you can just mush it around and then all of a sudden you have a clean eraser again. Can't tell you how many times I've picked up just a regular eraser and started to erase and had it leave a permanent mark on a piece, and it really was a bummer deal, but anyway, here we are. So love the Faber-Castell kneaded eraser, one of my favorites. And of course, you know, I've got a little bit of chocolate here with me. I'm doing a little of the Ghirardelli dark chocolate mint. That's my thing today, so I'm going to be working with that. Now, when I was talking about the colors, I did misspeak. This happens to be magenta in my hand, which is PC930. I cannot locate my process red, so I'm going to work with this instead. So here we go. We're going to start with just a little bit of the blush pink first, and I'm going to just zero in on this star right over here, and all I'm going to do is I'm going to stay on the left hand side of the star where there is a division line. So you can see that I'm going to go very, very lightly with that blush pink, and you can see that I'm also leaving a little lightness up at the point. I'm going to turn the tile, look for the next divided diamond here, do a little blush pink, and then once again it's going to keep on turning. Here we go. And once I have that, you can see that I'm already starting to get some dimension here. Now I'm going to pick up that darker red. This is the magenta, but if you want to use process red, if you want to use dahlia purple, oh, and when you know it, process red was right in front of me and I didn't even see it. PC994. I'm such a silly girl sometimes. So anyway, working with magenta today, coming in, dusting in, and you're going to see me go all the way around, just without a care in the world. I'm just throwing it in there and then moving on. Just getting it on the page. Now, what I love about these colors, especially when you use that blush pink for a base color, they play so well together. That blush pink is going to make this magenta move around in such a nice way because it lays a beautiful foundation for it. So I'm going to come in now with that lighter color, and you're going to see me go right along the line of demarcation, and I'm doing these little circular movements with that pencil. And you can see that it turns that color into a very soft blur of the magenta meeting the uh, the blush pink. So as I turn it, look at how soft this is, but the transition here is rough. So I'm just going to go ahead and do little circles, pulling around the pigment here, really blurring it out. And you can see why I love working within this tangle and doing this particular way of shading. It's very, very pretty. So you can see that that's really come out quite nicely. Now, for those of you who know me, you know that I love working with the white color pencil from Prisma. This is the PC938. And what you can do is you can come up to where the transition is between the blush pink and the white, and you can do little circles and let that transition be nice and soft. And you can see there's a difference there. Notice how here it's a little more buttery and here it's a little bit more rough. So these little tricks I think are just wonderful to have in your toolbox to make the tangles that you're doing that much more elegant, that much more, I don't know, just that makes them pop out a little bit more. It gives them that special flair, I think. So you can see that's how I'm going to be handling these. So I'm going to go over here and I'm going to finish up this one. And for this particular class that we're doing today, I'm just going to be focusing on what I do up here, and then you guys can go around and do it. My throat is just not going to be able to handle doing an entire class. So here we go with what we've got, right? Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and finish up this star. You go ahead and do all of yours, and then when we come back, we're going to add some more color. So before we let go of working with the pink here, I'm going to go ahead and start to bring in a little bit of pink into our bird that we have. I'm going to do just a little blush of it around the wing here. And you can see that I'm leaving space with a little bit of that white right around the front of where that is there. Okay, and then the other place that I'm going to add a little bit of that pink is I'm going to start to work inside of the flower that we have here. And you'll notice that as I come into the flower, I'm going to start to leave just a little bit of light up at the top. And as I turn, I'm just doing the same thing again. So just working around. And getting right in there. And then when we come back, I'll start to bring in a little bit more of that. Actually, let's just throw it in there now while we have the chance. So I'm just going to go ahead and pick up my darker red. And you could be using the process red or whichever you like. And then I'll come back in and I'll start to bring a little bit more of that darker red right in here. I'm going to pick up some of that blush pink again, and I'm going to push around that pigment. Little circles right over so that that blush really starts to pop, and then the same thing over here. You can see how that brings a little vibrancy into those central petals, which is really pretty. Okay, so go ahead and do yours. I'm going to finish up mine, and then when we come back, we're going to switch into a new color. So let's focus back in on our starlight here, and I'm going to go ahead and pick up a little bit of my yellowed orange here. Now I'm not going to work inside of the diamonds that we just worked in. I'm actually going to work in the diagonal diamonds here. And remember how we always talk about how each of your color pencils is 3 different colors? You have your light, you have your medium, and you have your dark. It's all about the amount of pressure that you're putting on that pencil. So what we're going to do is we're going to come in nice and light to this, very, very softly, little circular motions, just starting to get into that star point here. You'll notice that I'm leaving a little bit of light up in that corner. And so all I'm going to do now is I'm going to come in and I'm going to press a little bit heavier onto that pencil. And you can see that I've got that different color in there now. I'm going to pick up the white. Now I have been using that white with the pink, so I want to make sure that it's clean so you can see that I'm taking my thumb and just rubbing it across. That way it gets that other color off of there. And then I'm going to go where the line of demarcation is, and I'm just going to roll that white right over the top, and look at how it transitions that color in a much softer way. Now you can roll that all the way up to the top, and it will really break any line of demarcation that you have there and really keep it nice and soft and blended. So I'm going to go into all 4 points that I have that are the diagonals. Remember, we're not working in the other side of where the pink is, just where the diagonal points are, and laying down that yellow. So you go ahead and do yours. I'm going to finish up mine. And remember, relax your shoulders, take a nice full deep breath, let it go with a sigh, and then go for it. Have fun with this. We're going to continue to use a little bit of that yellow in here, and I'm going to take a little bit of that yellow and just run it right along the edge of where the belly of my little bird is, just to give this a little bit of a highlight here. You'll notice I'm not going to bring too much up at the top, just a little bit, just to get him to glow. Now you can pick up a little bit of your white pencil and you can blur these into each other here, and you'll get a beautiful pastel feel around our little birdie here, which is really, really sweet. I just love the way that he looks. So you can go ahead and do those on the bird, and then you can also notice how beautiful that yellow is contrasting with that pink and with that magenta. So take some time with that, and then when we come back, we're going to add a little bit of that pink and magenta into the berries. So I'm picking up a little bit of the magenta here, and you're going to notice that I'm going to come up to where Bronx Cheer is. And I'm going to start out with that darker color first, and you can see I'm going about halfway through Bronx Cheer, and I'm going to push a little bit harder on the outside edge, and I'm going to zoom in on that so that you can see it. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take some of that pink and blur it over, but leave just a little bit of white right on the other side, just to have it have just a little bit of a highlight on it. And I'm going to go all the way around and do that on each of my Bronx Cheer. So let's let go of the yellow and the pinks here, and we're going to start to bring in our greens. I'm looking for a light green and a dark green, and you know me, I do love that lime peel green. This is PC1005 from the Prismacolor set, and then I also have grass green, which is PC909, and I love these two together. I think they just have a winning combination together. So we're going to focus in on the area that's all around the bird here. And I've got this really nice and sharpened up here. And you've seen me do this technique before where I use the side of the pencil to fill in the space. So I'm just going to come in holding the pencil pretty far back. And all I'm doing is little circles and laying down that lighter green first. And you can see that I'm kind of dancing it around those stars in there. And then I'm starting to work around Bronx Cheer, trying not to get too far into Bronx Cheer. And I'm working around the beak of our little bird here as well. Coming in and starting to just put down that foundation of green in that area. So you can see that I'm really just focusing on this area. Now, doing it like this would be fine, but I love to see a little bit of definition and shading inside of a piece. So we're going to do what we call perimeter shading in Zentangle, and it's exactly what you think it is. It's just hovering along the edge, and you can see that I've switched over to that darker green here, and I'm just hovering along the edge of the stars and just letting that color dance down around the bird. I'm going to work over here and letting it dance around the star again, getting right in there. And then I'll come in and start to bring in a little bit of that lighter green and push around that darker pigment just to give it that really painterly kind of look inside. And you can see how that starts to change everything. It just makes it a little bit more interesting to look at, using the lighter color with the darker color. The two work so beautifully in unison. Now I'll come back with a little bit of that darker green, and I'm just going to go right along the black line in here. I'm really looking for a nice pop of color in here. Just to make it really feel interesting. Now I've noticed that I missed a spot with that lighter green, and this is a really great place to demonstrate what it looks like when you don't blend the two together. See how this is kind of flat, and see how this has a lot more glow? It's because I didn't bring in that lighter green into that area. So you can really see the difference when you start using your colors to do your blending. It really gives it that extra something, that characteristic that just really gives it that special feel in the background. And if you wanted to, you could also pick up your white pencil and start to get really buttery with that color and really blur it out if that was something that you were looking for. So you can see that I've picked up that white, and all it's doing is just pushing around that pigment and making it even softer than it was before. And so you can see that that really highlights the area around that bird and makes it look really interesting. So we're going to do the same thing in each of the areas around your birds. So go ahead and do that. And then when we come back, we're going to start to add in some color into our corners. So now we're going to start to work in the corners here, but I want to show you. In my original, I did these really beautiful black corners, which gives this whole thing a real nice pop to it. But one of my students did some blue in here, and I did make the suggestion that if they didn't have a thick-nibbed pen like this, that they could work with their color pencils. So I'm going to do a demo with the color pencils, and then I'll show you how to do the black if you're interested in working with the black. So for the dark blue, what I'm going to be using is Light Aqua PC 992, and then I'll also be working with Copenhagen blue, which is PC 906. And you can see that I'm working with a dark blue and a light blue. Okay, now what this is going to look like is I'm going to start by working with the lighter color first. And so I'm just going to get in there with that light blue, almost creating a halo effect around my star. You can see that I'm just working with that lighter blue right around the star itself. And then as I move away from the star, I'm going to really just kind of let that kind of get a little blurry there. I'm going to work into the corners here by picking up the darker blue, and you can see that I'm working with that blue on the side of the pencil. I'm just laying down that color really loose and soft, and getting right into the areas that I have on the outer edge. You can see that I'm lightly running over where that light blue is meeting the dark blue, but I'm not doing a ton of it. I'm going to go work right along where the black edge is and start to bring in a little bit of pressure on that pencil. You can see that I'm turning the tile just to make it work for my hands here. And as I start to work down, I'm lightening up my touch just a little bit. So you can see where my line of demarcation is on this. Giving it a little extra pressure in the corners there. And then what's going to happen is I'm going to come back in with a little bit of that light aqua, and I'm going to start to blur the edges. I'm going to get that really soft blend of the blues with the lighter blue. And you can see that as I get closer to the star, I lighten up my touch. So it's almost as if that star is illuminating the sky around it. And just really getting in there with that light aqua. I love the way that light aqua works with that Copenhagen blue. They are just such a great pairing together. You can see that it really gets into those nooks and crannies. And isn't that so pretty, the way you get that really nice illumination around the star? You can see that I've picked up my white pencil and I'm just going in and starting to soften it up a little bit. Just like so. And this really gives it that feeling of the night sky, almost like we have a sunset in here, which is really pretty. All right, so if you want to work with color, you can work with color. Now, if you're not interested in working with the color and you want to work with the black, I'm going to just bring in a copy that I made of my piece here. And I happen to have one of those permapaque pens in my hand, but you could also use your Pen or a thick-nibbed Micron. And whenever I'm doing any of that black work that I love to do to get that kind of pop in a piece, you can see that I always go around what I'm working with first so that I don't have any opportunities with my tangles, so that I'm really just kind of protecting them from any kind of, how shall we say, lack of finesse when I'm doing my inking in or my pooling in. So I'm just doing little circles and going fairly light with that pen, but you can see that I can kind of bounce around or buffer into that darker, thick layer of color as I work around the star. I don't have to be overly cautious. I can have a little bit more freedom in the way that I work. So you can see that I'm working in little circles. And so there you have the star with the black, and then here you have the star with the blue. So you can decide how you're feeling about this today. It may be that you like one or the other, and I just wanted to give you the freedom to try whatever you wanted to try. Okay? Have some fun with that. Really loving the glow off of those corners. Very, very cool. Something a little different. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start to pick up my graphite pencil and a nice blending stump. Now remember, if you don't have a blending stump, just go grab a Q-tip out of the bathroom. And this is just a regular number 2 pencil here. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to start to bring some graphite into the piece, and many of you know that I wait until the very end to do graphite because it has a tendency to smear and smudge, but I'm also going to give you a technique to set your graphite so that you don't have to worry about it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in right along the divided diamond here, and I'm just going to do a very, very light dusting of graphite right along that division line. And then I'm going to pick up the tortillon or the blending stump, and I'm just going to do a little circles to just blur it out and give it almost a fogginess inside. Now you'll notice that I have that little light source over there that I'm trying to hold on to. I'm going to come back in with a little bit of that pencil, pressing a little bit harder here just to get a little bit of pop out of that color, and then I'll go ahead again and start to soften the edge of it. Now, if you lose your white in the corner, remember our really fun erasers that we have? What I love about these is that you can shape them the way that you want them and then bring back in your light if you lose the light, which is really, really nice. So I want you to think of an eraser as a tool. It's not just for opportunities, it's actually a tool to bring light back in, which is great. So I'm just going to come back in, add a little bit of that fogginess into that, and I'm going to work all the way around the star and do just that. So you'll see that I'm going to come in, and when I have a lot of areas of which I'm doing the same thing, you'll notice that I'll come in and I'll do all of the light work first, and then I'll come back in and do my blending. And that for me makes it so that I don't have to pick up and put down my pencils over and over again. So you can see that I'm just starting to work that through. And you know, I talk to my students a lot about watching a piece emerge. And this is a really great point where you can watch the piece emerge here. So looking at this star and seeing all the dimension, and then looking at this star and looking at it how it's a little flatter now. You know, so you look at it and you go, okay, I see why I'm doing the things that I'm doing. But it's also really cool to watch a piece come about. There's something about the process of creating that is really, I find, very interesting and almost inspiring every time I come back and do something, watching it emerge from nothing. You know, we started out, we just had a blank piece of paper, and now here we are. We've got something really exciting going on. Okay, so I'm going to go over here and do the same thing with this start, and then I'm going to talk about bringing some of that graphite into the bird, into fescue, and into our internal flower. Now, if you're like me and you don't like working with graphite without setting it, you can pick up your white pencil, and what I love about this is that it just leaves a layer of the wax that's in your pencil over the graphite, and it stops it from smudging or moving. So you can see that I'm just going over this with a little bit of that white, and then watch, if I touch it, it does not end up on my finger. It stays on the page. Now, it may darken your graphite just a touch, but I find this to be a really great way to do blending. I've often used just the white pencil for blending, but I really love that you can set that color and forget about it, and you don't have to worry about it. You can see that it does make it a little bit darker, a little bit sharper, but I do love the idea that that graphite is totally set and I don't have to worry about wearing it on the side of my hand. You can see that I'm just kind of coming in there and just getting in there with that. Really, really nice way of working with graphite. Now I am going to take a little bit of the graphite pencil again, and I'm going to start to work with fescue. And all I'm going to do is just work into these corners with just a little bit of that graphite. And then I'll pick up my blending stump, or you can use your Q-tip for this, and you can see that as I move away from the center, it lightens, and I'm going to leave a little light on the points of the fescue here. So just a really soft dusting of that graphite in the corner, and then working it out until you have white at the points, which really brings a little bit of interest. And once again, talking about that idea of looking at it here and then looking at it here, just that little bit adds a lot to the piece. The other thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to come in and I'm going to just add a little bit of graphite underneath the wing right in here. Pick up my tortillon and just blur it out a little bit. And that way you get a little shadow on his wing, but you don't have to add a ton of color to get dimension there. So I'm going to go ahead and go all the way around and do mine. You go ahead and do yours. Let's bring our attention into the center flower that we have in here. I've picked up a little bit of the graphite here, and I'm going to start to add a little shadow on each of these little petals that I have in here. and I'm going to pick up a little bit of that tortillon. Now you'll notice that I'm trying to leave as much white on the edge as I possibly can, and remember, if you lose it you can go ahead and pick up an eraser, but you can see that as I go through here I'm really trying to maintain that light on the outside edge. Little circles on each of these, and you can see that that's starting to bring some dimension into the piece here. So I'm going to bring a little bit of darkness in there and just start to bring in that shadow, which I really, really love. And so as you turn the tile, you'll just do the same thing again, just bringing in a little bit of that darkness on either side and just letting that start to blur out, but leaving a little bit of white right on the edges. So go ahead and have fun with this. You're going to see that this is going to bring a lot of dimension into the center and really start to make that flower become a central point, because before you can see it was really flat in here and now it's starting to have a little bit of pop. So go ahead and play, and then when we come back we're going to start to work in the center. So I'm going to take some of that blue that we have in our corners here and I'm going to bring that into our centerpiece. So I'm just going to start with that lighter blue first and just go ahead and dust halfway through that centerpiece and then just a little bit below on the bottom, creating a nice light source up in that upper left area there. Now once I have that, I'm going to go ahead and bring in some of that darker blue that we were working with, and I'm going to just add a little bit of it, and I don't have to press really hard because the pigment is so intense that it'll just glide right over the top of that other blue. Now you can see that I've come back in with that light aqua and I'm starting to blur the two together just to get a little bit of interest inside of that piece. Now I want to see a little bit of moodiness in that central area there, so I'm going to pick up a little bit of graphite and dust in a little bit of graphite on the side here, and then I'll take a little bit of that light aqua again and start to do little circles like using a tortillon just to get it with a little bit of interest. I love that kind of moodiness in the center. And I'm also going to pick up a little bit of that green and do just a splash of that green, leaving just a hint of white in that corner. And I just love the way that that looks. I think it gives it just a little bit of interest that it wouldn't have had before. Now I am going to pick up a little bit of my white gel pen, and I happen to have the Jelly Roll 10 in my hand. This is made by Sakura, and I always just get it started on my finger, and then I'm going to just go ahead and give this a little bit of a sheen on the side where it has the darkest point. Now I'm also going to bring in a little bit of that white into the center point of each of my stars so that it just kind of grabs your attention when you are just looking at the stars. So if you need to make the black points at the center of your stars a little bit more robust, you can go ahead and do that as well. So you can see that I'm just bringing that into those, and when I zoom out, look at how cool that is. It really has a unique feel to it, which I really like. So go ahead and do yours. I'm going to finish up mine, and then we're going to start to talk about the outside edges when we come back. Now, if you did your outside edges with a little bit of the black, you can come in and add 3 stars in each of the corners just to give that a little bit of interest. That's always really fun to do. Or you could add more fescue in with white, which is always fun. There's just different ways to go about doing it. Now, with these blue corners, you know me, I can't resist adding a little bit of wallpaper to it. So I'm just going to come into this corner right here and start to work. So let's go ahead and zoom in on this. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up my dark blue, and I'm going to just start to do a little bit of shaddock in here. And shaddock is just some arches that connect with each other. And you can see I pressed a little too hard and my pencil broke, but it's still okay. So I'm just going to continue working. So you can see that I've got just a nice arch there. And then I'm going to make another one right over here. And then I'll make another one right over here. And what I love about this is I can come back in with my white pen and I can start to add the Milky Way in those edges, which I think is going to look really, really pretty. And you can see that that brings in a little bit of whimsy into those corners. So I'm going to go around to each of these and do that same thing. So as I'm looking at this, I'm feeling like it needs a little something special in the center. And so I've picked up a little bit of my gold metallic pen here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start to work in the aura of my piece here and start to bring a little bit of that metallic gold right into the center here. And I really feel like this is going to give it a little bit of that sparkle factor that it wouldn't have had before. And I just love working with the gold. When in doubt, add gold. So you can see that I'm just starting to work my way around, and it's really picking up quite nicely next to the black. And just working my way around that centerpiece just to make it have its own shine, its own thing that makes it unique. It also will help clean up any lines that you feel weren't really popping before, and now bringing a little bit more into the piece. You can see that I'm just working my way around, and it's really starting to get a nice glow, which I really like. I find with these metallic pens, the lighter you go, the more the ink flows, and you can see that I'm barely touching the page. I'm actually just letting the ink drop out of the pen. And I would say that I buy these pens on the regular because if you don't use them, they get very viscousy very quickly. And so I would say that I buy quite a few of these just to keep them going. But look at what happens when you bring that into the center. It just really gives that quite the sheen. And I'm even going to go around the circle in the center and bring a little gold into that as well. And look at how that really plays quite nicely with it. And if you wanted to, you could even add some gold dots into your corners just to give that a little bit of interest. If you wanted to have a little bit more embellishment, you could come out into the corners and do that as well. Okay, so play, have fun, and I'll see you in a minute. Now, one of the things that I realized I forgot to do was add a little embellishment into the beaks of our birds, and I've picked up my dark red, and I'm just going to pop a little bit of that dark red into the beak of each of my little birdies here, just to define them a little bit, and that will just make them pop that much more off of the page. Now is the time where I would, start to look at any lines that had gotten lost while I added color into the piece here. So if you see something where, a line got lost and you want to really just kind of clean it up, you can pick up your pen and, clean up those spaces that need a little bit of extra attention. And then finally, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up my dark blue and put my chop into my piece here. And so I'm just kind of looking at it the way that I think I want it to present. And then I'm going to choose a corner, and this is the corner I'm choosing, and I'm just going to put my initial down in the corner here just to show that I'm feeling like I have completed the piece. So here we are. We survived yet another adventure of Zentangle in color. So this is really an opportunity right here to offer gratitude for this moment of creating together, and maybe just honoring yourself and recognizing that you did something just for you and created a place of creativity and refuge and sanctuary. And I hope that it brought you some peace. And so I would love to see your creations. You know, we have our page over and on Facebook. It's called the Tangled Yogi Art Community page, and my students share their work there. We have a very supportive group, and everybody does something a little bit different with it. And so we all learn from each other, which is really cool. So I hope you'll go over there and check it out. And if you enjoyed the class today, give the class a thumbs up or leave a nice review in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And even better, hit the subscribe button, and that way you know every time I'm dropping a class onto the page. And it also helps other people to find our classes on YouTube that want to try Zentangle in color. So that's it for me. I'm Rami Marks, your Tangled Yogi. Thank you for joining me for the Starlight Delight class, and I look forward to tangling with you all really soon. Bye for now.